You're not a little kid anymore. It's okay to say no. Welcome back to the Secure Husband Podcast. Bruce Abbott, certified professional coach and founder of SecureHusband.com, where I help good men stop shrinking themselves for approval. If there was ever one word that could be so terrifying, it's no. Or more specifically, your ability to say no when something doesn't feel right. Maybe when something's costing you your peace. When your gut feeling is screaming inside and you just can't say the word no, even though you want to, because you don't want to upset anyone. Maybe you were raised to believe that love means never disappointing anyone. Maybe you were taught that saying no meant you're selfish, you're cold, you're unloving. Some of you have been living your whole marriage saying yes when everything inside of you wanted to say no, because so many men associate no with rejection and conflict. And that triggers our nervous systems. We overagree, destroying intimacy. We build resentment. Saying no is actually an act of love, not just for others, but for yourself. So you have to rebuild this internal authority so that your no is calm and clear, but powerful. We may not realize that we're scared to say no. We might not use the word scared, but our nervous system is triggered. And why is that? Well, subconsciously, there's a fear inside. And that was something we learned when we were children. I'll talk about that in a minute with the inner child inside. But most men who struggle in their marriage, see, they're not emotionally abusive or manipulative or checked out. They're overly accommodating. They don't feel comfortable saying no, so they say yes to conversations they don't want to have. They say yes to decisions they don't fully agree with. Sometimes they tolerate the intolerable. They say yes to a sexless marriage, or maybe starfish sex, where there's no emotional presence. Or sometimes they just go silent when something hurts. Why is that? Deep down, you're terrified that if you say no, you'll be rejected, judged, called selfish, or abandoned. So instead of risking that, you go along with things you shouldn't. But every time you say yes when your soul wants to say no, you teach yourself that your boundaries don't matter. And over time, you stop trusting your own voice. That little boy inside of you doesn't trust you either. You become agreeable on the outside, but resentful on the inside. That kills intimacy. That kills connection. Not just with your partner, but you are disconnected from yourself because you can't be close to someone you're resenting. And many times, even subconsciously, you're resenting yourself because you wanted to say no and you didn't. You can't be loving if you're not honest. And you can't be honest if you're too scared to say no. That's self-abandonment. So you first have to notice where you're handing away your power. Ask yourself, where in my life am I saying yes when I really want to say no? What might that look like in your marriage? Maybe you let her set all the rules for the relationship without any discussion or feedback from you. Maybe you agree to go along with parenting choices that you feel uneasy about. Maybe you go silent when she crosses a line, not wanting to make her upset, hoping it'll just blow over, or fear of dealing with the situation. Maybe you do things out of obligation instead of desire. The story you often tell yourself is, I'm just trying to keep the peace. But if keeping the peace costs you your voice, that's not peace, that's avoidance. And every time you avoid truth to dodge discomfort, you're not leading. You're people-pleasing. You're complying. In many ways, you're trying to manipulate. But that compliance builds resentment. And remember the podcast about courage? You have to act before you can feel courageous sometimes. So you start noticing where you feel that gut feeling, that moment of hesitation where your body says no, but your mouth says okay. That's the first sign that your internal authority has been hijacked. So notice that. Feel that feeling. Because when you feel that feeling, that's where you're going to choose to act from. So as soon as your nervous system, that gut feeling inside of you, starts yelling at you, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. You act with courage. You make a choice to make a new decision. My no matters just as much as my yes. Because if you've been conditioned to think that saying yes is kind and generous and loving and that no equals rejection or aggression, you have to reframe that thinking. Your yes has no value until your no is also on the table. What do I mean by that? A yes that comes from fear or guilt or people-pleasing isn't loving, it's manipulative. So now your yes isn't a gift, it's a survival strategy. And your no becomes a loving gift. Now, the other person may not see that, but that's what's honest and authentic to you. That's where you choose. You decide that, hey, I'm allowed to say no. I'm not a little kid anymore who's going to get in trouble. Are there going to be consequences? Maybe. But if these consequences are faced because you're being truthful and honest and authentic, well, that tells you something about the situation. So when you notice and then you choose, you can disagree and still be loving. You can do it from a calm, clear, grounded, loving place. And you can hold boundaries and still be compassionate, because boundaries are loving. They're loving to yourself and they're loving to the other person, because now you are showing them how you want to be treated. And that's loving, whether they understand that or not. But you don't have to be harsh to be firm. You only need to establish a boundary strong enough at that moment to get the message across. So you don't have to come in there with a sledgehammer. Yeah, use a small hammer. Did that work? Oh no? She blew right through that boundary? Okay, next time, use a little bit bigger hammer. Blew right through that boundary? Now we've got to find a bigger hammer. You use the amount of boundary appropriate to the situation. And it's not going to always be well received. The idea of a boundary is not going to be something that feels good to someone else. But here, you're not here to be liked by everyone all the time. You're here to become a man who can be trusted, especially by yourself, especially by that wounded boy inside of you who equated no with danger. That fear of saying no didn't start in your marriage. It started in childhood. Somewhere along the way, you learned that saying no got you yelled at, or setting boundaries made people withdraw or punish you, that asking for what you needed got you punished or ignored. So you made this decision, this conscious decision, a coping mechanism, that it's safer to just go along and be agreeable and keep everyone happy, and that'll keep me safe. And that probably worked when you were 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 13 years old. But now that little boy still runs the show, even though you're a grown man. Every time you hesitate to speak up, every time you bite your tongue, not say what you really want to, every time you give in when something doesn't feel right, that's fear talking. That's that little boy who is scared. But you're not that little boy anymore. You don't need to be afraid of saying no to protect your safety. You're not going to get a belt whipping anymore. You're not going to get sent to your room. You're not going to get grounded. You're not going to be abandoned. You're not going to be unloved. Unless you're living with someone who punishes your no, and if that's the case, you really need your no even more than ever. But you're a grown man now, and that boy inside of you, he's looking to you for protection. And protection looks like boundaries. But it all starts with healing that little boy, giving him love and compassion. You don't shame him. You don't blame him. You don't guilt him. You say, little guy, I know you just did what you had to do to survive, but I've got you now. I will protect you now. I will no longer let us be walked all over. I will be clear about what we need, because you are worthy. I am worthy. And you connect with divine wisdom, divine guidance through prayer, meditation, journaling, God, Spirit, the universe, whatever your belief system is. You go to that spiritual guidance to confirm your unconditional love, your inherent worth, and you ask, what is the loving action? What is the loving boundary that I need to take next? And you have that dialogue to get clarity, because you need something bigger than you, wisdom greater than you, and you listen, and you'll get your answer. It may be that quiet voice inside of you that tells you exactly what that boundary should be and what you need to say, and you listen to that. And then when you learn what that aligned loving action is, what that boundary is, then you start practicing it. Safe, calm, grounded boundaries. And it takes practice. And it may be a healthy, secure, no, sorry, I can't. See, a secure no, it's not angry. It's not passive aggressive. It's not guilt-ridden. It's calm. It's clear. It's compassionate. It's loving for you, and it's loving to the other person. Let's say your wife is demanding your time during a moment when you genuinely need solitude to recharge. Now, instead of snapping or folding or agreeing, a secure husband might say, babe, I love being there for you, and I also need to take an hour to decompress. Let's talk afterwards when I can be fully present. Or maybe she wants to talk late at night and you're emotionally drained. You're able to say, babe, I want to give this the attention it deserves, but I know I'm not able to do that right now. Can we revisit this tomorrow when I'm more grounded? And then you have my full presence to listen. What if you're asked to agree to something you don't feel right about? You can say, that doesn't feel like something I can say yes to with integrity. Let me sit with it more before deciding. And then, if you decide that it's not something you want to do, You can say, hey, after thinking about this, I'm sorry, I can't. Now, do you see the pattern there? You're not attacking or controlling. You're not collapsing. You're staying calm and grounded in truth and honesty, authenticity. That kind of no builds trust because it's rooted in self-awareness and not shame. And we've been operating from core shame our entire life. So we can detach from that guilt and shame and stand in integrity. And that's where that deeper work pays off. Learning to say no without guilt. Learning to soothe your nervous system. So when it's screaming inside, you're able to not let it take over. Because learning to say no without guilt is incredibly courageous. Guilt is that weapon that your wounded parts, well, sometimes even your partner, use to drag you back into people-pleasing. Because that hamster wheel in your mind starts going, oh, I'm letting her down. She's mad. Okay, gotta fix it. Okay, gotta smooth over the situation. Oh, I'm being selfish. None of that is true. That's old programming. You're working from those false core beliefs. Guilt is just a shadow of past survival strategies. It's not your compass now. Your compass now is integrity. Does this decision honor my truth, even if it's uncomfortable? The answer is yes, then you're doing the right thing. Even if it makes others upset. I always think of no pain, no gain, because long-term trust is built on short-term discomfort. Because this is not easy to do. Sometimes love means saying, I love you enough to be honest, not just agreeable. And the other person may not like the decision, but they trust that decision is authentic. And that allows you to live as a man who honors your no. That's integration. That's becoming a man whose no carries strength, not because it's angry or loud, but because it's calm and consistent and rooted in self-respect. It's not becoming defiant or rigid. It's becoming trustworthy. Trustworthy to yourself and to your wife and your family, but more importantly, yourself. And you live in alignment with your truth. You stop being reactive. You stop being manipulative. You're no longer resentful or collapsing for approval. You're now leading. You're setting the tone and taking the lead. And you bring safety, emotional safety. Not because you're agreeing with everyone, but because your presence is anchored in truth. And truth is the foundation of secure love. So yeah, it's okay to say no. In fact, I would say it's necessary. But you're not doing it to punish. You're not doing it to reject. You're not doing a narcissistic power play. You're protecting your inner clarity. You're honoring your own voice. You're modeling emotional leadership. You're no longer saying yes out of guilt. And you're saying yes from choice and no from peace. Both are acts of love because you're no longer a little boy and you don't have to worry about getting in trouble anymore. Hey, I hope this podcast was helpful for you. If you haven't subscribed, will you hit that subscribe button? If you're a regular listener, will you give me a review? That helps other men find this podcast for their own healing. And if you need help getting unstuck, visit securehusband.com and set up a free 30-minute consultation with me. Just a conversation. And I'll see you again on the next Secure Husband podcast. Thanks for listening.